Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. Now, I didn't realize how much people were focused on one part of the Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson interview. And that part was when Tucker started talking about evolution, and him and Joe had this back and forth. It's a short clip, but I noticed that people were really stuck on it, and people had this almost this visceral reaction towards Tucker Carlson because he was saying that we don't really know much about evolution. He was saying that evolution is not proven, it's still a theory, and that got a lot of people upset. So I was like, let me look into this a little bit. I like to go down little rabbit holes, so I'm like, so let me search into this a little bit. Before I get into that, don't forget about the new channel, Coach Colin Media. We break away from the Rogan content. I got 58 videos up so far and one more that's releasing in the next hour. We're not playing around on that channel. Hit that subscribe button. But besides that, again, I started looking into it. Tucker Carlson says evolution's fake. Joe Rogan's shocked as Tucker Carlson says evolution is not true to his face. Joe Rogan stunned. Tucker Carlson goes full moron. That's a funny title. Now, yeah, a lot of people were just upset by what this guy had to say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this clip now, and then I'm going to go into what I found, because there are some scientists that actually are very much echoing what you're about to hear Tucker Carlson say. And it kind of made me think of Graham Hancock and what he was dealing with when he had that sit down with that archaeologist, and how he got framed as a pseudo archaeologist because his thought process didn't match up with the rest of the community. It's very, very interesting. Listen to this.
The data center outside Dulles Airport? No. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
I don't actually think that individuals, I don't think I'm that important. My life is that important. I will die. I know that. And I try to keep that in mind every day.
But you're important to everybody that cares about you. You're important to the people
but
around you.
If we don't think people are important, then what do we think is important? I guess that's what I'm saying.
It's not necessarily that we don't think people are important, but if evolution is real, and if there is this constant, I don't know, but it's visible. Like, you can measure it in certain animals.
You can measure adaptation.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that in fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution. The theory of evolution as articulated by Darwin is like kind of not true. Right?
In what sense?
Well, in the most basic sense, the idea that, all life emerged from a single cell organism and over time, and there would be a fossil record of that, and there's not. And
there's not a fossil record of transitionary species, like species that are adapting to its environment.
There's
and
tons of record of adaptation, and you see it in your own life. I mean, I have a lot of dogs. I see adaptation in dogs, through the litter to litter. But no, there's no evidence at all that zero, that people evolve seamlessly from a single cell amoeba. No, there's not. There's no chain in the fossil record of that at all. And that's why you don't actually hear people, you hear them make reference to evolution, because the theory of adaptation is clearly, obviously true. But Darwin's theories, totally, that's why it's still a theory almost 200 years later. No, we have not found that at all. And I can't even guess. I mean, I have my own theories on it, but they're not proven.
What are your theories?
God created people, distinctly, and animals. I mean, I think what every person on Earth thought until the mid-19th century, actually.
Right, but
it's not a new idea.
They didn't have computers. They didn't have a general understanding that we have today of the process.
Do you think we understand more now?
Yes.
Really?
You don't think that we understand more today?
We understand way less. We understand so little that we're actually sitting here allowing like a bunch of greedy, stupid, childless software engineers in Northern California to like flirt with the extinction of mankind. So no, previous generations would be like, what? No, stop. And we're not doing that because
but they wouldn't have done that even with the nuclear bomb. I mean, obviously the Manhattan Project was done in secrecy, but they wouldn't have stopped it because the imperative of getting this weapon before Hitler got the weapon was what it was.
Well, Hitler
on
was kind of
mind.
done by then. The Russians had pretty much extinguished any hope that would continue. But
not at the beginning
of the
project.
We were in the middle of the logic of war.
At the commencement of the Manhattan Project.
For sure. But the logic was the same, and it was 4 years of got to beat the other guy, got it. And I don't mean to sound too judgmental about the bomb. I know why they built it, okay? But you just...
This is where Tucker Carlson goes into the fact of hitting innocent people with nuclear weapons is not a good thing. And Ben Shapiro made a whole thing about how it is a good thing. And people could kind of see that Ben was trying to connect that to what's going on in the Middle East right now, and how it is a good thing that certain cities are getting leveled and bombed, and it was a whole thing. He got very attacked for what he's about to say here too. But I wanted to stick to the evolution part. I found it very, very interesting. Because in my mind, I was just like, oh, Tucker's wrong. That's all. He's just wrong. And he, like so many of my friends growing up and people now, like I grew up around a lot of Orthodox Jewish people. So they kind of believe that too. God made people and animals. And now I hang around a lot of Christian people, devoutly Christian men, and they have the same thing. They're like, God made people. Evolution is not real. And I always figured that stance was taken by people who are like just wildly religious, you know? They're just wrapped up in the book. And I'm like, okay, buddy, I got a Bible too, like, but relax. Like, it's a bit much. But in what I was looking into, there's a lot of scientists that are starting to experiment with these ideas, that are playing around with these ideas. Now, again, this is going to be a dense episode. I mean, I'm talking about these guys would look at Brett Weinstein like he was just the life of the party. They'd be like, whoa, this Brett's out of control. You know what I mean? They look at Eric Weinstein and be like, whew, wow, this guy's so zany. I mean, they're those type of scientists. So this one you're going to hear, he's actually going to quote Darwin himself in regards to the theory of evolution. And I'm going to play a bunch of other videos as well. Let's get into it.
Well, we can take Darwin's words himself to answer that question. Darwin himself said that his ideas on evolution are entirely based and totally depends on Elias' geological speculations, which have since been disproved by cutting-edge sedimentology. In a letter, with regards to whether it's true science or not, his theory, in a letter to Asa Gray, he wrote, quote, I am quite conscious that my speculations run beyond the bounds of true science. It is a mere rag of an hypothesis with as many flaws and holes as sound parts. Close quotes.
At least he's honest.
Now, the speculative nature of evolution, so obviously there's been about 150 to 200 years of time since Darwin published The Origins of the Species. And so we can also hear what others have had to say. And the fact of the matter is that there are, despite the very prevalent and dogmatic support that theory of evolution commands today amongst the scientific community, there are a leading and growing number of honest scientists that, following 150 years of fruitless searches for evidence that would support the theory, has spoken about the Darwin's theory. We have Dr. Ernst Chain, Nobel Prize-winning biochemistry, who helped develop penicillin in 1972. He called the theory of evolution, quote, a very feeble attempt to understand the development of life, close quote. In another statement he made, he said, quote, I would rather believe in fairies than in such wild speculation as Darwinian evolution, close quote. We have Louise Bonouret, professor of geology at the University of Strasbourg, say, quote, evolutionism is a fairy tale for grown-ups. This theory has helped nothing in the progress of science. It is useless, close quote. And we have Albert Fleischmann, German professor of geology, say, quote, the Darwinian theory of descent has not a single fact to confirm it in the realm of nature. It is not the result of scientific research, but purely the product of imagination, close quote. Obviously, we don't want to appeal to authority in our discussion, but I think it's important to give a perspective on the words that Darwin himself used, but also on the words of other scientists, eminent scientists,
sure,
that have taken a dispassionate view on the topic.
And I think this is something that's so crucial to...
So, this is very interesting, right? He's quoting some pretty big names. The man who helped develop penicillin, and they're calling it fairy tales and imagination and all this stuff. Now, there's so many things at play, right? These gentlemen could just be jealous. You know, I helped make penicillin, and yet there's still so much acclaim to this Darwin who's not even around anymore. There could be jealousy. There could be. Here's the thing that's weird with those quotes is that usually when people have debates, because I've been going through a lot of videos, usually the debate is the atheist view versus the religious view. So for somebody to be calling it a fairy tale, that doesn't read as somebody who would be devoutly religious. Because easily someone can turn to any one of your books, whatever religion you are, and they could call that a fairy tale. So that gentleman doesn't sound like he's all that religious, but he's calling it a fairy tale. Interesting, because on the other side, at least for some scientists, is intelligent design, right? That there's actually a maker to all of this. There's an architect, and he's building these things, and he, you know, like Tucker said, made humans and made animals and made the earth and did all this stuff. So very interesting, these quotes that this gentleman had. Now, obviously, who is hosting this man? This man here is Dr. Marco Fasoli, or Fasoli. That's who it is. And he's sitting with somebody, as you can see in the room, who is devoutly religious. I mean, I've never seen so much Jesus paraphernalia in my life. I've never seen so much. Even look at this guy. This guy's dressed like he's a monk. He looks like a Christian monk. I think he might be, with his head shaved and everything. So that's the type of person who's going to be hosting this guy. So it's like, okay. So your views are okay around somebody who is devoutly religious, right? I wonder how he takes that fairy tale quote. I don't know if he takes that as a ding to him or a win on his side. Now I'm going to let this guy go on just a little bit longer. Then we're going to move on to some other stuff. And then I'm going to show you why Joe Rogan was kind of having this conversation with Tucker Carlson, this little back and forth in bad faith. I'll just call it the way I see it. Love Joe Rogan, of course, picture right there, but a little bit in bad faith, a little bit of acting for Joe Rogan, I would say. Let's get into this.
Anyway, so the question I have for you now is regarding Darwin's theory. What are the biggest problems that you see in his theory?
There are so many problems. I will highlight just a few, but we could have lots of talks about this. The whole thing is, as intimated by some of the earlier quotes, is full of flaws. But the fundamental issues with it are, I'll just list them quickly. First of all, evolution is not observed and is not happening today. It has not been observed in the past. It presupposes but cannot account for the origin of life. I'm talking primarily of biological evolution here. It violates an important physical law, the second law of thermodynamics. Its proposed mechanism of natural selection and mutation has been shown conclusively not to work. It fails to account for the irreducible complexity that we observe in biological systems. It fails to account for the origin of specified information in the biological systems, primarily the genetic code. And it fails because it violates many first principles in philosophy, which actually renders the very concept of evolution metaphysically impossible and hence irrational. That's just a summary of the problems. But
look how happy this guy is to hear that there's flaws in the theory of evolution. He is so happy. Just such a big smile on his face. Absolutely hilarious. Now, again, I'm only playing this. Look at him, so happy. He's like, oh my gosh, thank you. I can't wait to put this video out. Now, I'm only showing this because, and I don't know if what he's saying is true, but I'm showing it to show that there are scientists who actually are more in what Tucker Carlson was saying, where they've pushed this theory aside almost, where they're jabbing at this theory. And we'll talk a little bit about why that's a good thing. I guess I could talk about why it's a good thing now. I mean, it's a strong theory. And, there's tales of, I forgot where I heard it, but it was this myth, or maybe it was real, I don't know. But these angels would all wrestle with this immensely strong, these men would all wrestle with this angel, this very strong angel. And they only wanted to wrestle with that angel, and they would all always lose. But the fact was that in wrestling with that angel, they became stronger. They constantly became stronger and better. So that's kind of what these scientists are doing at the same time. Darwin, again, like the gentleman said, 200 years ago, came up with this theory, and this theory is still standing up because of a bunch of dogmatic scientists and a bunch of evidence. Evidence. Tests. There's tests and data, and at the end of the day, it's widely accepted. That's another thing I didn't actually bring up. A scientific theory. This is why Tucker Carlson's a little bit wrong. It's a theory, and it will stay a theory. Because when you have a scientific theory, like the theory of gravity, it will always be a theory. Actually, it will never be proven exactly evolution will never be proven as a law, the law of evolution, unless some wild technology comes out like a time machine and we're able to go back or go forward or something and really verify what was going on. Then you could say, yes, 100%, this is very, very true. But the reason that it's a theory is because in science, this is how it's supposed to be, there's always supposed to be an opening for more information that can discredit the theory or solidify the theory more. It's never supposed to become a law with the theories that are made by man. The laws of physics, a little different, but even that, at one point, when maybe we come in contact with an interdimensional being and they know how to break these laws, and all of a sudden it doesn't become a law. But that's too much. That's for the tinfoil. I didn't put on my tinfoil Speedo for this episode, okay? It's a dense episode. The scientists here, okay? We gotta dress properly. I got a tinfoil bow tie when the scientists come in the room. All right, let me just play this clip. So this gentleman's interviewing 3 scientists who actually feel very much that evolution is in question.
Here. Biochemist Franklin Harold, in his 2001 book, The Way of the Cell, quote, "We should reject as a matter of principle the substitution of intelligent design for the dialogue of chance and necessity, but we must concede that there are presently no detailed accounts of the evolution of any biochemical system, only a variety of wishful explanations," close quote. And Michael says, well, to begin with, that's quite a breathtaking concession, and congratulations, the science has moved along enough to recognize the limits to Darwin. And then Michael continues, Harold never spells out his reasoning, that is to say, why we should reject intelligent design in principle, but I think the principle probably boils down to this. Design appears to point strongly beyond nature. All 3 of us are down for, everybody's down for that. It has philosophical and theological implications because some think that science should avoid a theory that points so strongly beyond nature, they want to rule out intelligent design from the start, close quote. This is the question of drawing lines. And I pose the question to Michael Behe, what the heck is wrong with that? We just say, science goes as far as it goes with our 5 senses and what we can reason therefrom. And when it hits a dead end, it says, dead end. Okay, well, you haven't got it. Radioactive decay, gravity, don't know. Go ahead. So what's wrong with drawing these very sharp lines? Why do you want to include intelligent design in the scientific enterprise?
Well, for a couple reasons. First, if scientists claimed that they did not know how life developed, that would be good with me. That would be a step in the right direction because they don't. Unfortunately, people pretend that they do. On the other hand, we can tell, we conclude design, we infer design from physical evidence. It's not from some, vision or anything that people have. If you look at a mousetrap, you can tell it was designed, and you can tell because you see how the parts are arranged, what the relationship of the parts with respect to each other to perform a function. When you look at an outboard motor on a boat, you see the same thing. You see a purposeful arrangement of parts. Now we see that in the machinery of the cell. We see outboard motors in the cell. We see trucks in the cell, and so on.
But your life would be so much easier if at the end of your article you said,
less fun.
You said, if you would like to pursue this further, go to the Department of Philosophy. Go to the Department of Theology. Here the science ends.
I say that after we conclude design. I do not infer to God And as I write, some people have approached me and said, yeah, I'm with you, I think it's intelligent, but I think it's, space aliens have visited us.
Fred Hoyle's explanation.
Exactly.
Go ahead, John.
I think the basic question here is, there are several and they're very important, is what is an explanation? That's a crucial question. And Michael cited Newton, hypothesi non fingo. His gravity, when I was taught in school, I thought the law of gravity explained gravity. And I was an adult before I discovered it explains no such thing. So that even a scientific explanation within its own terms is rarely full. It's almost never full. That's the first thing.
Very, very interesting. And I know there's so many people who are going to be so upset. They're going to be like, it's proven, it's gravity. Well, my theory of gravity is that the reason that we all stay on the ground is because when we eat, most of the food goes down to our feet. I know you don't know that, but it does. And that's how we stay tethered to the ground like this. Yep. And buildings, same thing. It just goes down to the bottom. That's just what happens. And I'd be like, that's my theory. And you'd be like, well, that's a stupid theory, Colin. Nah, I'm not putting up with that theory. And you'd poke holes in it. You do all that. That's what you're supposed to do in science. You're supposed to poke holes in these things. It's supposed to be a theory because they want people to build on it, or they want people to smash it to the ground so they can move on and be more intelligent about what they're doing. So, yeah, very interesting. Funny that guy said, there's some people, but they say, I believe you, and yeah, space aliens. And the scientist is for sure like, no, I can't associate with you. I'm sorry, that's not where I'm going. But space alien, you think it's space, you come talk to me. Listen, I'm Christian, but I'll go down a deep rabbit hole of aliens visited and Anunnaki and the Nephilim. I'll go all the way into those things. I love it, but these guys don't. So makes sense though. But it is very interesting the way these guys are thinking. Now, what I'm going to play for you is they actually do talk about the systematic blinders that the rest of the scientific community have on. And the thing is, if I had seen this video 3 months ago, I don't know what I would have thought. But because I just saw Joe Rogan talking with Graham Hancock, I'm bringing it up again, Graham Hancock and Flint Dibble, Mr. Dibble, remember that guy? Because I just saw that, I understand now that there are massive fields of study where people just decide, this is what we know, this is what it is, and if you have anything to say that's outside of this, you're not a part of this group, and we will get to the point where we will attack you. And I think I've seen that with archaeology. I think in the past 4 years I've seen that in society. I think you guys all know what I'm talking about. I've seen that a lot. So I'm not surprised that it happens in this part of science as well. It's just like, what do you don't believe in Darwin? You kidding me? That's like, 15 years ago, going up to somebody, 20 years ago, going up to somebody and just saying, man, I just believe in aliens, man. I just believe in aliens and a secret society that runs everything. Bro, you said that 20 years. I used to say that to people 20 years ago. It was just like, huh? Now everybody knows you used to have to explain what the Illuminati was. Now you can just say it to someone, they'll giggle and they'll be like, yeah, okay, maybe. It's wild what becomes accepted if you keep pushing, if there's a bunch of people who keep pushing. Let's listen to this clip though.
Secondly, we admit at all kinds of levels explanations and...
Of course, you're rather argumentative. But all three of you strike me as rational men, and yet look at the lives you lead. Steve Meyer wrote an article on the Cambrian explosion for the Proceedings of the Biological Society at the Smithsonian Institution, and his editor was harassed and finally left the institution. Michael Behe has evoked from his colleagues at Lehigh University, which is a great university and especially strong in the sciences, a statement on their website that Dr. Behe is entitled to express his views, but we, his colleagues in the biology department, do not view them as science.
He's been disclaimed.
He's been disclaimed. Why? Academics espouse all kinds of crazy ideas. Why should these ideas, why should the challenge to Darwin and the suggestion that if there's a code, there's a coder, the suggestion of an intelligent design, evoke such singular hostility? What is going on? I'll start with John because I didn't give you the
What is going on is the domination of naturalism and materialism in the academy, which is so ironical. I'm from Oxford University. Its motto, and it's been there for a long time, is Dominus Illuminatio Mea. The people that founded the great universities of the world had no problem with the idea of an intelligent designer of the universe. But now somehow, in the academy, anybody who espouses the idea that was the foundation of modern science in the 16th and 17th centuries, arguably as a historical thesis, is out. That strikes me
and that
as
idea,
a very...
that idea is? The founding idea is?
The founding idea is, well, let me quote C.S. Lewis. Men became scientific. Why? Because they expected law in nature, and they expected law in nature because they believed in the legislator. There it is, encapsulated. That's Whitehead's thesis, if you want it, North Whitehead. And the point is, these gentlemen here, tragically, have been subject to an anti-intellectualism that has lost the spirit that lies behind the modern science that these universities claim to teach.
It's almost...
So, the gentleman you're seeing on the screen now is the host of this show, this channel. It's called A Daily Dose of Wisdom. And the scientists that you were seeing was John Lennox, Michael Meyer, and Michael Meyer, Stephen Meyer, and Michael Behe. Behe is B-E-H-E, like he, but Behe. And this gentleman is the host. So I found this full conversation, watched it, and then all of a sudden the algorithm started sending me this guy's stuff. And it's very, very interesting stuff that he puts together. I don't know if he's super religious. I don't know what it is. Maybe he just likes to question things like I do, but it's an interesting channel for sure. Now, I just want to say, it seems like from everything I'm pulling up that I'm fully on the side of people pushing aside evolution, and that's not true. But the thing is, when it comes to evolution being true, being real, being proven as fact, you can find that all over the scientific community. You can just put in evolution into YouTube right now, and there will be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos. But there's only so many of, well, actually, there's actually a lot of gentlemen talking like this. But I wanted to just show this because this is not put on the main stage that often. Now, I have another channel to bring up, or another video to bring up really quick, where, again, it's Stephen Meyer, but two other scientists as well. A mathematician and a computer science professor from Yale University. Now, those names used to hold, Yale used to hold some weight. Now all you think about is skull and bones and protests. It's pretty, but I'm just telling you who they are. So I'm going to play this clip too. Listen.
The ratio of functional to non-functional is 1 over 10 to the 77th power.
Okay, so functioning proteins are extremely rare. It's very hard to imagine random mutations leading to functional proteins, except that, and here I quote Dr. Galanter again, but the theory understands that mutations are rare, and successful ones even scarcer. Darwinism knows this. To balance that out, there are many organisms and a staggering immensity of time. Your chances of winning might be infinitesimal, but if you play the game often enough, you win in the end. Correct?
That's the
and
theory.
That's the question. Do you play it often enough? There's always an often enough, and the question is, does the history of life with which Darwin was concerned allow you enough chances to make it at all probable, let's say, or even possible that you'll hit on one, statistically, that you'll hit on one of those amazingly rare necklaces that folds up into a protein that can be stuck in a cell and actually doing anything. I'm not a biologist, and so I look at this and say, yeah, sure, there's enough time. There's been a lot of creatures on Earth, and life has gone on for a long time, but when biologists look at this and try and nail it down and figure it out. Try and make a guess. Try and use heuristics to make a guess, like using the number of total bacterial lifetime as a measure of the number of total mutations we're playing with. The point is, from whatever angle you come at it, the answer is no, there has not been enough time. The number of throws we've had is too puny even to talk about. It doesn't even approach puniness, and certainly is nowhere near reasonable. So we would get that if we had a reasonable time, but we don't. We didn't. We haven't.
So let me just be very explicit from my little Winnie the Pooh bear-sized mind. You are saying that Darwin is unlikely it's unlikely that species arose the way Darwin said, or you are saying it is impossible. Darwin was just mystic. Lovely man, beautiful idea.
There's hardly a difference. There's hardly a difference. Unlikely, impossible. We're talking about odds that are so prohibitive. If you wish to say it's impossible, fine. I'll defend you saying it's impossible. If you wish to say it's highly unlikely, I'll be in your corner as defense attorney as well. But there's no practical difference. We've known about these things for hundreds of years. Right? You get 1 million monkeys at 1 million typewriters, all of them typing at random. We know they're not going to produce the collected works of Shakespeare in anything like a reasonable amount of time.
I just got to skip over. They bring up The Simpsons and Dumb and Dumber. So basically, I'll just break it down for you. You know the episode of Mr. Burns where they're talking about, these monkeys are going to type out the best literature of all time. And then he pulls out the paper and he says it was the best of times. It was the blurst of times. And he crumples it up and goes, stupid monkey. And then they talk about Dumb and Dumber, how a girl says to Jim Carrey, the odds of us getting together are 1 in 1 million. And, dumb Jim Carrey in this movie, he says, so there's still a chance. And he's very happy about it. They're comparing those two scenarios to Darwinism.
Of cashing out this probabilistic argument. If you have 1 over 10 to the 77th power is your ratio, but then you have if every organism in the history of the planet, and we can estimate that, about 10 to the 40th organisms. So you divide
bacteria, little tiny things, everything, every mosquito, every bacterium.
Yeah, every time one of those replicates, there's a possibility for a mutation that could search the space of possibilities. So you got 10 to the 40th possible mutations against a search space 10 to the 77th strong.
Right.
So if you do your exponential math, you end up with what it means is you can search 1 10 trillion trillionth of the possible combinations. So in that case, are you more likely to succeed or fail? You're overwhelmingly more likely to fail to find one of the functional combinations, even taking into account every organism that's lived on Earth. And that means that the Darwinian hypothesis is overwhelmingly more likely to be false than true.
Interesting. Very interesting. I told you this is a dense episode. Now again, you're looking at this man here, and this is the part where I say Joe Rogan is kind of having that conversation with Tucker Carlson in bad faith. And just so you know, all those numbers that they went over, that was just wild. But again, I only show this, if you're taking it in as information and you're like, this is interesting, that's great. But I only show this to show that there's many scientists that are combating this idea of evolution, that are actually breaking it down. And even in this conversation, they go on to talk about something that Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson actually touched on, which was, do you think we understand more today? And Joe Rogan's like, yes, we have computers and we're gods and we're creating a god and AI and all this stuff. We all know his mindset already. But Tucker was like, no, I think we understand even less. And it actually seems to be true. The scientists that are willing to actually take a stab at this whole thing, that are willing to break free from the dogma, one of them even brought up, the more they look into a cell, the more that they keep peering into a cell as technology gets better and better. He was saying how it doesn't take us closer to anything, like intelligent design, Darwinism. Like, it doesn't take us closer. It actually takes us further away because they keep figuring out more and more. And they're like, this is crazy. And these are things that Darwin just couldn't know. He made this theory in the 1800s, right? I don't know. I don't know. So again, back to the whole bad faith thing. Why do I say that? Well, because this gentleman who has all these theories, Stephen Meyer, has been on his podcast. He's been on the podcast. They've sat together. They've talked. They've talked together for a while about this exact topic. So it's so funny that when Tucker brings that up, he goes, I don't know. Rather than just being like, I've talked to people who feel like you feel in regards to evolution. And I actually know there's a bunch of scientists who feel this way as well. Instead of saying that, he just goes, I don't know, is it? I don't know. I think we do know more. Completely disregards this man, who is a very smart man. I know that the immediate scientific community might discard him as a pseudoscientist. He doesn't believe what we believe. He's a pseudoscientist. And guess what else? Tucker Carlson's not a journalist, according to MSNBC and CNN and all of these major mainstream media outlets. He's not a journalist. Jon Stewart says that too. It's like, okay, Graham Hancock's not an archaeologist. All right, I'll go watch his archaeology series on Netflix. I'll go watch Tucker Carlson's journalism every single day. Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's interesting. So they have a conversation about this whole thing. And just so you guys know, I'm not screwing you around. Joe's in there. Was it just Joe talking? There you go. There you go. He was in the room. So he's talked to this gentleman. Very interesting that he just didn't bring that up. Now, of course, I'm the JRE interpreter. I'm the connoisseur. So I understand Joe's mindset. He likes to have people just be a blank slate. He likes to be a blank slate for people so he can understand how they think, how they draw to their conclusions. So I get that. But at the same time, you are a person. You are having this back and forth. You're acting like Tucker Carlson's saying something that you've never heard before in your life, when in reality, you've had hours-long conversations about it. Multiple. Like, you know, at least just be like, I've talked to guys that feel like you feel. I understand what you're saying. At least so you can find common ground, because that's also the point of the podcast, is to have common ground and understand each other. So that was the last thing I was going to play. I'm not going to play the clip. I've already played too much JRE within this one. Actually, you know what? I have not. Is evolution real? Should I play this, guys? I don't know. This is getting kind of dense. You know what I mean? Let's get into it. Let's get into it a little bit.
Chemical evolution, the idea that the non-living chemicals in a prebiotic ocean or prebiotic soup arrange themselves to form the first living cell. And I'm also skeptical about the creative power of the mutation selection mechanism, which, as it happens, so are many leading evolutionary biologists today. I attended a conference in 2016 at convened by the Royal Society in London, Royal Society being the oldest and most august scientific body in the world. And it was convened by a group of evolutionary biologists who were essentially dissatisfied with neo-Darwinism, the standard textbook theory that we learn in all high school and college textbooks, and many of them were saying we need a new theory of evolution. The first talk at that conference was given by Gerd Müller, a prominent Austrian evolutionary biologist, and he simply enumerated the 5 major what he called explanatory deficits of neo-Darwinism. And his basic perspective was the mutation selection mechanism does a good job of optimizing or modifying pre-existing forms. It can generate small-scale variation, but it does a very poor job of explaining the origin of those forms. Think about, for example, the Darwin's finch beaks. Great job of explaining how variations in weather patterns result in changes in the shape and structure of the finch beaks. But that mechanism turns out not to do a good job of explaining the origin of birds or other major animal groups in the first place. So modification, yes. Innovation, no.
So modification over massive amounts of time, don't you think that would eventually lead to new groups? Because a lot of new groups have similar origins, or at least origins from one ancestor.
Well, time,
like primates.
Time was always the hero of the plot. But let me just run a couple of arguments by you, and let's see what you think. Okay, and I developed these in a lot of detail in my book Darwin's Doubt. if we now know, thanks to the genetic revolution, the molecular biological revolution, that if you want to build a new form of life, you have you have to have new code, because all new forms of life depend upon new anatomical, a fundamentally new type of animal, for example. So you need new anatomical structures but the new anatomical structures require new cell types, new types. So if you got animals that first come on the line and they have a digestive system, they have a gut. Well, you got to have enzymes that can service a gut, that can process food. So enzymes are types of proteins. Proteins are built from the informational code in DNA. So anytime you want to get it's just like in the computer world. If you want to give your computer a new function, you've got to provide new code. So we have these long digital bit strings of A's, C's, G's, and T's, not zeros and ones, but A's, C's, G's, and T's in a digital string, and we call that a gene. And if you have a section of DNA for building a protein, that's great, all works. Now, but if you want to build a fundamentally new form of life, you got to have new proteins to service the new cell types to build the new anatomical structures. In our computer world, we know that if you start randomly changing the zeros and ones in a section of digital code, you're going to degrade the function of that code long before you come up with a new string for making a new program or operating system. The functional sequences they're highly isolated in what's called sequence space. You can change a few things and still retain function, but after a very few number of changes, you're going to degrade the function, and long before you come up with a new function. Now, the Darwinian mechanism starts with the idea that there are random changes in those digital bit strings, those sequences of A's, C's, G's, and T's. And based on our experience in the computer world, we would expect that random changes are going to, again, degrade those strings long before they're capable of building a new protein. And there's now very compelling experimental evidence that that's true. There's an Israeli molecular biologist, Dan Tofik. Unfortunately, he died fairly recently in a tragic accident. But he was doing mutagenesis experiments on sequences of code for building specific proteins that fold it into stable structures. They're actually called protein folds. And he found that between 3 and 15 mutations was enough to degrade the thermodynamic stability of the protein structure that the gene was making. And once you lose that thermodynamic stability, you have no functional possibilities.
Is there possibly an undiscovered mechanism for protecting against that we're not aware of yet?
Possibly, but there's numerous lines of evidence suggesting that mutations are within limits. You can modify again. You can optimize an existing protein structure called a fold. But if you allow too many of those mutations, you're going to degrade. And long before you would get a fundamentally new protein structure, another protein fold. So that's just one of many. I want to run one other argument by you that I think.
Oh, this guy. Wow. It's wild that Joe Rogan has these conversations, because I know he's not comprehending all that. I know he's not. I've been listening to this for hours as I was researching this episode. I can't fully comprehend it. All I understand is the fact that there are so many things that Darwin did not know. This is the only thing, the only argument that I could have. There's so many things that he did not know while he was building this, and there were probably other scientists who had his back as time went on, and they kind of maybe filled in the blanks. But there are a lot of scientists who are like, nah, probably not. Probably not. Probably doesn't make any sense. I don't know. But the one thing that Tucker said to Joe that actually stands true through all of this is the explanation from one cell to whatever version of human being you want to talk about. That one cell to whatever version of human being. You want to talk about Neanderthals, you want to talk about humans today. There actually isn't much proof, especially with what he's talking about. Now, I comprehend this a little bit. This whole, no, I don't. No, I don't. But from what I just heard him say, it kind of gives way to what Tucker was saying, how there's no proof that we went from one cell into a human. I don't know. And there doesn't seem to be much. I'm looking at these trees. There's this tree of evolution in regards to humans, and they don't have the real root of it. They don't have the one cell thing marked up. But you know what that reminds me of? There's a saying when it comes to the Big Bang and in science in general is, if you give us, science always needs one miracle. They just need one miracle, right? And these guys, this guy, all these scientists I've been showing you, they're messing with that miracle. Science just needs one miracle, and then they'll explain the rest. And that's kind of what this is looking like. But also, you know, maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. You know, he's had Brett Weinstein on a few times, Joe Rogan. He's had Brett Weinstein on a few times. But I will say, Brett Weinstein seems so dogmatic in his field of biology. He seems like he's a very dogmatic, not breaking. He's not a Graham Hancock of biology. He is a strict student of biology. And then there's other things he'll break off in and be like, you know, he'll put some tinfoil on, right? So just wanted to show you guys that. What do you guys think about evolution? I do not know. And on my best day, I don't care. But it's very, very interesting to hear that there are scientists, because I didn't know this. I thought it was just something that everybody followed and that was it. I didn't know there were scientists who are questioning it, getting attacked for questioning it, being called pseudoscientists for questioning it. I did not know that. And that makes me wonder. As soon as I see that, just like before, you'd see some doctors say some things, and then all of a sudden those doctors aren't real doctors. Get those doctors out of here. Don't listen to those ones. It was like, okay, should only listen to you? I shouldn't listen to him? But he said the whole, no, don't listen to him. And don't do your own research. I was like, oh, okay. I don't know. I have no idea, man. But it's interesting. Very, very interesting. If you want to know where this gentleman here, he hosts a lot of different people. This guy right here, he hosts a lot of different people. He has hosted, why are you on this guy? There you go. What? Stop going on him. This guy has hosted a lot of different people. He's had conversations with Jordan Peterson. He's had conversations with so many scientists. He works for an institute called the Hoover Institute. If you ever want to look into it, there is the hooverinstitute.org, and then they have something called Uncommon Knowledge. So I'm going to definitely give that a gander and see what's going on there, because it's cool for somebody who is a very esteemed intellectual to be exploring different topics like this. Very much so. And his conversations with Jordan Peterson are amazing. Anyways, guys, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. I'm out.